Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, and this is the healthiest half hour anywhere online today. We appreciate you joining us right here on Facebook and on YouTube. Now, coming up today, it is our Thanksgiving extravaganza, celebrating a little bit early this year so that you can use some of the tips we're going to share in your celebration next week. So joining us today for this feast of knowledge is Dr. Neal Barnard. He's going to be here giving us the lowdown on turkey. You know, many say this traditional Thanksgiving headliner is healthy, but Dr. Barnard says you may want to think again, and for a number of reasons. Dr. Barnard, looking forward to this conversation, sir.
Likewise, Chuck.
And you and I are also going to be diving into new discoveries regarding COVID-19 and how that affects the brain. The pandemic obviously throwing a major wrinkle into holiday plans this year. So this will be an interesting study as well. Appreciate you bringing that science. And a little bit later on, more turkey talk. We're going to be asking the question, well, what does Thanksgiving look like without the turkey? If this is a new concept to you, we're going to be mapping out the perfect plant-based menu filled with foods that everyone will want to gobble up. And we're going to be doing that with our own dietitian, Maggie Neola. Maggie Neola, I'm ready for you to make my mouth water.
Can't wait. See you soon.
It's a full show today because we're also going to be opening up the doctor's mailbag, giving you the opportunity to ask Dr. Barnard a question. If you have something on your mind related to your diet, your health, nutrition, whatever the case may be, go ahead and post that in the comments or the chat box right now. You can also tweet that to us using the hashtag ExamRoomLive. But before we go any further, let's get caught up on the latest happenings. Here are your health headlines for Wednesday, November 18th, 2020. As coronavirus cases continue surging across the country, drug maker Pfizer now says it will seek emergency authorization with the FDA for its coronavirus vaccine within a matter of days. The move comes on the heels of the announcement that that vaccine is 95% effective. Meanwhile, infections are rising in every state, with at least a dozen seeing rates double over the last 2 weeks, and the number of deaths also climbing rapidly, up 40% during that span. Yesterday's numbers in line with the trend, a staggering 160,000 new infections being reported, with more than 1,500 people succumbing to the virus. In other news, a new study finds that cutting down on dairy could be beneficial for people with metabolic syndrome. Researchers in Seattle examined dairy's effects on regulating blood sugar, finding that while those who consumed milk and yogurt and cheese didn't necessarily experience elevated blood sugar levels, they did have reduced insulin sensitivity, thus increasing the risk for diabetes. And this held true regardless of whether it was low-fat or full-fat dairy. The 12-week study of more than 70 adults also found that those who ate full-fat dairy experienced modest weight gain. Metabolic syndrome, by the way, is a group of risk factors that raises the risk for heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and other health problems. And finally, students at the prestigious Oxford University in the UK have voted to ban red meat in an effort to fight climate change. After voting by a 2/3 majority in favor of taking beef and lamb off the menu, the student union spoke out about their concerns, saying that until now, Oxford has shown a lack of leadership in addressing climate change, adding that the move is a feasible and effective strategy to help the university meet its environmental goals by the year 2030. Well, congratulations, Oxford. That is fantastic. Let's move on now. Thanksgiving and turkey, they have been synonymous with each other for generations. Family and friends, they gather around the table, eager to pile it high on their plate during this annual feast. But their body may actually be more thankful if they had a turkey-free turkey day. Have you ever stopped to wonder what else you're piling on your plate that comes with that turkey that you probably aren't even thinking about? Well, let's think about that now as we welcome Dr. Neal Barnard to the Exam Room Live. Dr. Barnard, first of all, happy early Thanksgiving, my friend. And secondly, turkey, we've talked a lot about chicken and the contamination and cholesterol that comes with that. Are we seeing the same kind of thing here with the turkey that will be the centerpiece for Thanksgiving this year?
Yeah, you're seeing both. You are seeing contamination and you're seeing cholesterol in both cases. Keep in mind what you're eating is a dead bird. And the bird was raised with intensive farming in most cases, and they do pass viruses and bacteria one to the other. And so you see very, very similar problems with turkey farming that we see with the chicken farming. It's very, very similar. With regard to cholesterol, all animal muscle tissue, no matter where it's from, has cholesterol. And even if you throw away the dark meat and throw away the skin, the cholesterol is still mostly there. And the reason for that is something people may not appreciate. Cholesterol is in the lean portion of the meat, as opposed to being in the fat. The bad fat, the saturated fat, that's in the fatty layer. The cholesterol is mostly in the lean. It's part of the muscle cell membrane. And with regard to fat, let me give you some numbers. You take turkey drumstick. It's maybe about 48% of its calories are fat. It's very fatty, greasy, that thing. That's why people like it. And let's say I take the skin off of it, and you can then reduce it somewhat. And let's say I throw all the dark meat away and throw the skin away. And now all I'm eating is a skinless turkey white meat. It gets down to maybe about 20% fat, but you compare that to beans, which are about 5% fat, and the green vegetables, which are about 7%. The turkey is clearly on the heart disease side of the fence, not on the health side of the fence. So there you have it. When it comes out of the oven, not only does it have the cholesterol and the fat, it also has heterocyclic amines, which are those carcinogens that are most prominent in chicken, but they're also prominent in turkey, and you don't want them. So yeah, give thanks by not having your turkey.
Let me ask you this. You, like myself and so many others, actually grew up eating meat. Once you finally took that bird off of your table, did you actually miss it? Do you feel like you're not having as good of a Thanksgiving?
I have to say, all along when I was a kid growing up in Fargo, North Dakota, and we'd have the turkey dinner, and my dad would carve it up and give it out to us. To tell you the truth, we always preferred the sides anyway. We all like the stuffings and the mashed potatoes and all that a whole lot better than the bird in the middle of the plate. And I think nowadays, let's face it, people are waking up in many ways. They're waking up to obesity and health issues. They're waking up to the viral issues, the viral transfer, and we've seen these cullings that they've had to do of turkey farms because the influenza viruses are now pretty endemic in turkeys. And I have to say it, at least I'm hoping that it's true, that people are also waking up to the ethical parts of this as well, because that's often a good guide for what is healthy too.
All right. Well, let's turn our attention to something else people are waking up to, and that is every morning the fact that we are still in this pandemic. COVID-19 obviously throwing a major wrinkle into holiday plans this year. But I understand specific to COVID-19, there's new research regarding how it might impact the brain. What are we learning here?
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, we have some images. I wonder if we can show those. In fact, this is just from today. The Radiological Society of North America has a presentation, and it was done by Colby Freeman, who you see on the right. My hat is off to Dr. Freeman. He's a very young doctor. He's the chief resident in radiology at Penn Medicine, Philadelphia. But here's what he did. They looked at a large group of people. They all had COVID-19. 81 of them started to have altered mental state, meaning they were confused, didn't know where they were, had memory problems, or neurological deficits, visual deficit, inability to speak. So they got brain imaging. And what they found was strokes, either a hemorrhagic stroke where they bled just a little bit into the brain, or an ischemic stroke where a blood vessel was not allowing blood to go through. And then you look at who were these people. More than half of them had either diabetes or high blood pressure. So it's the story that you and I have talked about a number of times, that you're having people who have particular vulnerabilities to the virus. When they get the virus, all hell breaks loose. And what is really worrisome is it's not just a respiratory disease. It becomes a brain disease. And by the way, as you saw on the previous slide, blacks were overrepresented, which leads me to another thing, Chuck. Let me just throw this in real quick. We just got new data from the CDC about health disparities. And if you go to the next slide, what you see is just what we have been talking about, just what we've been afraid of. Who ends up getting COVID infected and having to be hospitalized, as opposed to getting the COVID infection and being able to stay home and recover quickly? Latinos, American Indians, blacks, much more likely to be so sick that they've got to be in the hospital and perhaps die, compared to Asians and compared to whites. Now, lest you think this is something caused by the color of your skin or whatever, it is clearly not. It's other things. Let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to show you. This was from the New England Journal. They looked at Black and white patients within the Oxner medical system in Louisiana. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. They looked between just March and April. They had over 3,000 COVID-19 cases, 326 deaths. And then you looked at who is dying. And well over 2/3 were in Black participants. 70.6% of deaths occurred in Black individuals. Well, why would that be? The reason for that is two things. It's partly because of economic issues, who has a job where you can work from home and who can't, but it's also due to disparities in underlying health conditions. Who's got more diabetes? Who's got more hypertension? If you put into the mix a statistical adjustments for the socioeconomic issues and also who's got the disparities in the health issues, you discover that the color of your skin doesn't matter at all. In other words, if you are a healthy person who's got good access to an otherwise healthy person who's got good access to medical care, then your course of COVID-19 is not going to be affected by your race at all. The bottom line message, no matter who you are, we need to make sure you've got good access to medical care, plus all the masking and distancing and all those things. We need to address the socioeconomic issues. We also have to address the dietary issues that are driving the diabetes epidemic, the obesity epidemic, the hypertension epidemic. Those are the big drivers of these racial disparities. And so it ends up translating not just into respiratory illness, mortality, but in the people who survive in these brain effects that you do not want to have. You don't want to have recovered from the respiratory part, but you got a stroke while you're in the hospital. So that's where we are right now, Chuck.
Information, Dr. Barnard. Appreciate that very much. We'll check back in with you in just a little bit when we open up the doctor's mailbag. And if you have a question for Dr. Barnard, go ahead and post that in the comments or the chat box. As always, you can also tweet that to us at PCRM or at Chuck Carroll WLC. Just make sure that you use that hashtag ExamRoomLive. But let's march forward now, because let's talk more Thanksgiving. Let's talk food, shall we? It is Thanksgiving after all. And for that, we're going to welcome dietitian Maggie Neola from the Barnard Medical Center to the Exam Room Live. And Maggie, I mean, if there is no turkey on the table and you're new to eating a plant-based diet, or you're having somebody over to your house who is plant-based and you don't know the first thing about it, well, what can you do? I'm glad that you have brought 5 scrumptious recipes that can help clear things up for us. Great ideas to get that turkey off of the table this year.
Of course, yeah. And all of these ideas are certainly modifiable. You know yourself, your preferences, whoever's going to be with you for Thanksgiving. And so being able to tailor that is a great idea. So yeah, I want to go through 5 really delicious combinations to leave you with a really satisfying Thanksgiving meal. The first one, if we're to think of a main feature aside from turkey, is making this autumn stew. And it's actually made with kidney beans, butternut squash, corn, and served in a cute little pumpkin there. So that can be kind of that centerpiece. And then let's add in some more vegetables, because these are really low in fiber, or low in fat, high in fiber, going to help you feel full and add color to your table. And of course, pairing it with our easy cornbread muffins. We've got a great recipe for that in our e-cookbook. So this makes a really satisfying meal with multiple food groups, and is option number 1. So let's go on to the second option that I put together here. And see which one you'd like to try. And just a plug too for our cookbook, it's pcrm.org/Thanksgiving is where you can download that e-cookbook for free. So this next option here is a lentil tomato stew. And this one is kind of just a basic stew with red lentils, tomatoes, maybe some fresh parsley and vegetable stock. And lentils are really, really high in fiber, which help you feel full longer. And some nice things to add to it to round out that Thanksgiving meal are your classic mashed potatoes, maybe a mushroom gravy, which really gives that a nice umami profile flavor. And then maple Dijon green beans are a really fun way to serve green beans that aren't just steamed and plain. But this brings in a little bit of maple syrup, Dijon mustard, and potentially some vinegar too, just to really give it a pop in flavor. So this is a really lovely combination of flavors as well. And then our third option is this sweet potato lentil shepherd's pie. So it's very much so a casserole where you layer lots of different lentils and vegetables on the bottom and put your mashed sweet potatoes on top with some breadcrumbs and bake it. And it's really hearty and satisfying. But again, let's add some more crunch and vegetables with a nice pear arugula salad, maybe with some cranberries on top. And then, of course, this stuffing, it's actually from a Simple Vegan blog, and it looks super delicious to me. It looks really easy to make, and such a favorite recipe for Thanksgiving time. All right, the fourth option is with a black bean chili. And this one is quite simple. I've probably talked about it so many times, but I do love it. And again, it features black beans, so a very filling food to include on your table this year. And with that, we want to add some green vegetables. So why not some sauteed garlic, spinach, and then also some more cornbread. And this, again, is just kind of a hearty option where you've got that warm soup, some really yummy cornbread, and some vegetables that are going to really help fill you up and provide some good calcium on your table too. All right, the last option is a sun-dried tomato lentil loaf. And this one is really just a combination of vegetables and lentils, very similar to a shepherd's pie, but it's not going to have as much moisture, and you're going to pack it into a small baking pan. And this is similar to meatloaf, for example. But let's pair it with some more color and give it this sweet potato pumpkin seed casserole, which is really just lightly sweet with some apricots in it, actually, which is really fun, dried apricots. And then why not some roasted Brussels sprouts with apples, very festive, again, adding more color. And so if any of these 5 options sound good to you, I encourage you to check out our e-cookbook and other recipes that we have on our website. This is just a brief sneak peek of some of those recipes you'll find in the cookbook, including options for dessert and cranberry sauce. So definitely check that out if you're interested in finding some more recipes for next week. And again, the URL is going to be pcrm.org/Thanksgiving, and it's totally free. So please enjoy that resource.
Well, I'll tell you, you got my mouth watering. That is no doubt about it. And it was not lost on me that there was, in fact, a vegan pumpkin pie recipe that was listed there. So that's awesome. pcrm.org/Thanksgiving. I also want to point out that I think that it's important here, if we're talking realistically, presentation here, I think is key when you have people coming over. If you're plant-based and they're eating their first plant-based Thanksgiving, that you really want to plate things so it looks as appealing and as appetizing as possible. And I think that it was masterful the way that the autumn stew was served in the pumpkin. Like, who isn't going to want to eat that? That is 10 times better than a bread bowl.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's really fun. You could even serve it in a small delicata squash. It's kind of this longer squash that's really, but it's a more single serving. So I really like that one too. And it's sweet. But definitely presentation is so important, whether that's the color of the foods you're having, the garnishes that you put on top, just being able to visualize what your table will look like and get that wow factor is important for getting people to serve that on their plates.
Before I let you go, I need to ask you as well. Obviously, things are going to be a little bit different this Thanksgiving. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. A lot of people will not be traveling. They're going to be staying at home. And that means they're not going to be cooking for 20 or 30 people, these enormous gatherings. So how can somebody scale down these recipes so they're not, necessarily trying to feed an army, but they're only trying to feed 2, maybe 3, 4 people?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, because we don't want to end up with a bunch of food waste. So the 5 different options that I put together are really just a main feature and a couple sides. And so you might want to just stick with that same structure of just picking 2 or 3 things for your meal. Of course, include some of your favorites and try and maybe cut the portions in half instead of making some massive casserole, just do half of the ingredients. And that way you don't end up with so many leftovers that you end up having to throw out. So definitely think about, who's coming, how much they eat in general. And if you can freeze anything, that's a great thing to do. A lot of soups, a lot of those stews that I had featured are freezable. So you could always preserve them in that way and eat them another time. So.
And when you're working with your patients at the Barnard Medical Center and you get the opportunity to maybe go over some menus and lay things out, you can actually share recipes with them like this, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah, all the time. I love doing recipe exchanges and trying to think through, like, what does somebody really enjoy? What are some things they don't like? And how do we make something that you're excited about that's also healthy and delicious?
Oh, yeah. It's so cool that you get to eat these things and move forward on your health journey, meeting those health goals. So if you want to schedule an appointment to meet with Maggie, telemedicine visits are available at the Barnard Medical Center. All you need to do is visit barnardmedical.org for a full list of states where services are available. You can also call 202-527-7500. I believe that telemedicine visits are now available in more than a quarter of the country. So there's a good chance that you can, in fact, link up with Maggie. So do that today, barnardmedical.org, or call 202-527-7500. Maggie Neola, thank you so very much and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
You as well, Chuck. Thank you.
All right. And I am grateful and thankful that Dr. Neal Barnard is still here, because we still have a little bit of business to do on today's show, and that is to open up the doctor's mailbag. We are going to be answering one of your questions now. And Dr. Barnard, here is today's question. It comes to us from Silence on YouTube. Silence wants to know, do you have to eat certain foods based on your blood type, or is that a myth?
There was a book that came out in the 1990s called Eat Right for Your Type. And it was a very popular book. And it said, if you are type O, that your risk for heart disease is a little bit less. So you can maybe get away with more meat. If you're blood type A, your risk for heart disease is a little higher. You ought to be vegan. There's a kernel of truth behind some of these things, but it doesn't extend to what you actually should be eating. And here's what I mean by that. People with blood type O actually are at slightly reduced risk of heart disease. And interestingly enough, in the COVID pandemic, people with blood type O are also just marginally less susceptible to the virus. So people with blood type O luck out a little bit in both cases. And people with blood type A have a little bit more risk of heart disease and a little more susceptibility to COVID-19. However, this does not mean that people with blood type O can get away with eating a steak and they won't get heart disease. The differences in susceptibility are so small that if a person with blood type O starts eating meat, their risk just goes up just like everybody else. And so researchers have put this to the test, looking at different kinds of diets for people with different kinds of blood types. And the evidence is clear enough that whoever you are going to be doing best on a plant-based diet. Even if you're blood type O, even if you have slightly less genetic risk, you're still at risk. And a plant-based diet is going to be the best for you, regardless of your blood type.
Fascinating research. Fascinating indeed. Dr. Barnard, thank you very much for your time, my friend.
Thank you, Chuck.
All right. And if we didn't get to your question today, have no fear. As always, we will save it and do our best to get you an answer on an upcoming episode. So keep on posting those in the comments and in the chat box. I do promise we look at every single one that comes in. You should see the list of questions that we have, and they're all so great. And we're going to do our best to get everybody an answer. So make sure that you keep on posting yours, and maybe it'll get asked on an upcoming Doctor's Mailbag. Coming up on the program tomorrow, we're going to be taking a look at plant-based pregnancy, what mothers-to-be need to know about vegan diets while they're carrying the baby and after they deliver it. What is there to know about plant-based pregnancy? We're going to be breaking that all down on tomorrow's show. So tune in. That is at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, right back here on Facebook and on YouTube. But for today, that is all the time that we have. I hope that you've gotten some great ideas for a wonderful Thanksgiving without the turkey this year. I mean, look at those 5 recipes that Maggie shared. They're all phenomenal. That autumn stew in the pumpkin, come on. Who wouldn't want to eat that, right? So check that out, pcrm.org/Thanksgiving. That's where you can find those recipes. I want to say thank you very much to Dr. Barnard and Maggie for coming on the show today, and to the crew behind the scenes that makes the magic happen. Thank you guys. And to you, my exam roomies, thank you so very much for tuning in today. And on behalf of everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. But until then, stay safe, take a stand, and keep it plant-based.